Elizabeth Smart, perhaps one of the most bone-chilling and heartbreaking cases of a missing person. Elizabeth Smart. It's June 4th, 2002. A quiet, ordinary night in Salt Lake City, Utah. The kind of night where you'd expect to hear the faint hum of crickets, maybe a soft breeze rattling tree leaves. But at the Smart family's home, that tranquility was shattered forever. Elizabeth Smart was just 14 years old, asleep in her bed like any teenager, when her life took a dark and unexpected turn. At around 2 a.m., a strange man crept into her room. You might think, what about the parents? They were sleeping right next door. This guy, Brian David Mitchell, entered through a window with almost chilling precision and whispered a deadly ultimatum to Elizabeth. Come quietly or be killed. Terrifying. But here's the shocking part. Her younger sister, Mary Catherine, was in the same room, frozen with fear under the covers, pretending to sleep. Let that sink in. Her little sister was awake the whole time, too terrified to move or scream. She watched Elizabeth being taken, step by step, into the darkness. It wasn't until hours later that she found the courage to tell her parents, and by then, Elizabeth was gone without a trace. Brian David Mitchell wasn't your run-of-the-mill kidnapper. He was a self-proclaimed prophet, a delusional man with apocalyptic beliefs and twisted motives. He took Elizabeth to a secluded campsite in the woods, where she was held captive, stripped of her identity, and subjected to unspeakable abuse. Mitchell forced her to wear a disguise, a veil that covered her face, and renamed her Shir Jeshub. He and his accomplice, Wanda Barzi, controlled every minute of Elizabeth's existence through fear, threats, and manipulation. For 9 months, Elizabeth remained missing while search efforts consumed the community. Flyers were everywhere. The case was on every news channel. People feared the worst. Another tragic story where hope would eventually dim. But here's another jaw-dropping moment. Elizabeth was paraded around in public on more than one occasion, right in broad daylight. She even accompanied Mitchell and Barzi on trips to places like the library, fully disguised. The most shocking incident? A detective, convinced he recognized her, questioned her directly at one point. Elizabeth, so deeply terrified and conditioned by Mitchell, denied her identity and played along. Finally, in March 2003, a stroke of luck and determination brought Elizabeth home. 2 women noticed and recognized her captors from their media coverage and alerted the police. When approached by officers, Elizabeth initially hesitated, still afraid for her life. But in that moment of pure tension, she confirmed who she really was. Her rescue felt almost surreal, a combination of relief, disbelief, and raw emotion. Kyron Horman. All right, let's talk about a case that's haunted families across the US. The baffling disappearance of Kyron Horman. Back in June 2010, 7-year-old Kyron was just another second grader, excited for his school science fair at Skyline Elementary in Portland, Oregon. His stepmother, Terry Horman, reportedly dropped him off that morning and even snapped a photo of him grinning proudly in front of his frog exhibit. Just an ordinary school day, right? Except it wasn't. That was the last time anyone claims to have seen him. The kicker? Terry says she saw him walk down the hallway toward his classroom, but Kyron never made it to his first period. The clock ticked on, and when he didn't come home that afternoon, panic set in. By nightfall, it became clear. Something terrible had happened. The search for Kyron was massive, one of the largest in Oregon's history, involving search dogs, divers, and thousands of volunteers combing through dense forests and rivers. Yet despite all this effort, it was like Kyron had vanished into thin air. Authorities turned their attention to Terry Horman, who suddenly seemed to be at the center of a web of inconsistencies. Allegedly, Terry had a series of suspicious text messages, a failed lie detector test, and, shockingly, accusations that she tried to hire someone to kill her husband, Kyron's dad, months before. But with no hard evidence, no arrest was ever made. You'd think this would be enough for a dramatic Netflix series, but it's a real unsolved tragedy for the Horman family. To this day, there are still no solid answers. No closure for Kyron's family, no resolution for a community left reeling, and no sign of the boy who loved frogs and science fairs. Every year, vigils are held in his honor, and the missing child posters with his bright-eyed smile remain plastered across Portland. Imagine being a parent, clinging to hope while the years tick by, haunted by every possibility, because each one is more horrifying than the last. What happened to Kyron? Was it someone close to him? A stranger? The questions linger, each one gnawing away like a painful echo. Madeleine McCann. May 3rd, 2007. A sunny seaside resort of Praia de Luz, Portugal. Families are enjoying their holidays, soaking in the sun and sea breeze. Around 8 p.m., a 3-year-old girl named Madeleine McCann is set asleep in her apartment. Her parents, Gary and Kate McCann, are having dinner with friends at a nearby tapas restaurant, yet checking on Madeleine every 30 minutes. Everything seemed to be safe, even routine, but by the end of the night, their world would be shattered. Madeleine was gone. The details are chilling. Madeleine was last seen around 9 p.m. when her parents checked on her. About an hour later, Kate returned to find the window open and Madeleine's bed empty. Chaos erupted. Imagine having your worst nightmares come true, only for it to get worse when you find out nobody saw or heard anything. It's every parent's horror, and the investigation that followed also turned out a bit messy. The local police, unprepared for a case of this magnitude, faced mounting criticism and conflicting leads that felt like trying to piece together a puzzle without half the pieces. Namely, the British and Portuguese police initially disagreed on investigative approaches, leading to delays and conflicts. Then, theories swirled like a tornado. Was it an abduction by a stranger, a kidnapping ring, or could it have been something even darker involving people close to Madeleine? Eventually, even Gary and Kate found themselves in the crosshairs, though they were later cleared. Years went by with multiple supposed sightings of Madeleine across Europe and even beyond. A psychic claimed to know her location, private investigators got involved, and the British press devoured every crumb of speculation. But here's the truly heartbreaking and shocking part. Despite countless theories and a massive investigation of more than 12 million, Madeleine remains missing. Etan Patz, May 25, 1979, in the bustling streets of Soho, New York City. 6-year-old Etan Patz was excited about walking to a school bus stop all by himself for the very first time. You can just picture it. Etan, with his blue eyes and toothy grin, proudly waving goodbye to his mom as he left their apartment. But tragically, Etan never made it to the bus stop. He simply disappeared into thin air, sparking one of the most infamous missing child cases in American history. The frantic search for Etan gripped the city. Flyers with his face plastered everywhere, extensive ground searches, and endless media coverage made Etan's disappearance one of the first missing children cases to receive national attention. For many parents, it was like waking up to a nightmare they didn't know they were in. Back then, the concept of stranger danger wasn't widely discussed, but this case changed that. It was so impactful that May 25th was later declared National Missing Children's Day. For decades, no one knew what happened to Etan. Then, in a shocking turn of events in 2012, a man named Pedro Hernandez confessed to luring Etan into the basement of a bodega and killing him. Hernandez, who had worked in the area at the time, claimed he acted on impulse. But wait, it gets stranger. His confession was disputed and there was no physical evidence tying him to the crime. It was one of those situations where justice seemed both close and impossibly far away. Hernandez was eventually convicted in 2017, but many questions linger. Did he really do it? Why did it take over 30 years to find him? It's a haunting story that changed how missing children cases are handled, with Etan becoming the first child to appear on milk cartons in 1984. His disappearance isn't just a story. It's a dark chapter that echoes every time we hear about a missing child. Jaycee Dugard, June 10, 1991. An 11-year-old Jaycee Lee Dugard was waiting for her school bus near her home in South Lake Tahoe, California, when a car pulled up. Out stepped Philip Garrido, a man with a sickening past. In seconds, he tased Jaycee, dragged her into his vehicle, and vanished. The entire kidnapping unfolded right in front of Jaycee's horrified stepfather, who desperately gave chase on his bicycle. But it was too late. She was gone. For years, Jaycee's fate was unknown. Her mother never stopped searching, putting up posters and raising awareness. Meanwhile, just 170 miles away, Jaycee was living a nightmare in Garrido's backyard. He kept her in a series of tents and sheds, brainwashing and abusing her for nearly 2 decades. Jaycee even gave birth to 2 daughters during her captivity. It's difficult to comprehend the strength it took for her to survive in such conditions while being completely cut off from the world. The most shocking twist came in 2009, 18 years later, when Garrido brought Jaycee, who was now 29, and her 2 daughters to a parole meeting. The officers quickly sensed that something wasn't right. They discovered Jaycee's true identity, leading to her emotional reunion with her family. Finally, her ordeal was over, but the damage and scars she carried would take much longer to heal. Jaycee's story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. Despite the horrors she endured, she became a symbol of resilience and hope, using her experience to advocate for victims' rights. Her memoir, A Stolen Life, gives a harrowing insight into her years in captivity and is a testament to human survival. It's a story that leaves you questioning how someone can endure so much pain and still choose to live with courage. Ben Needham. On July 24, 1991, a 21-month-old Ben Needham was playing near his grandparents' farmhouse on the Greek islands of Kos when he disappeared. The day started like any other, with Ben toddling around, curious about everything in sight. His mother, Carrie, had been adjusting to life on the island and was always cautious. But on that day, it only took a few moments for Ben to vanish from sight. His family's worst nightmare had become reality. Local searches were intense but fruitless. Some believed Ben had been abducted by human traffickers, while others speculated he was taken in by a family that couldn't have children. Over the years, there were reported sightings of a blonde-haired boy resembling Ben, but none ever panned out. It was grasping at smoke, always leaving the Needham family with crushed hopes and more questions. Shockingly, in 2016, a new theory emerged: that Ben had died in an accident involving a digger that was operating near the farmhouse on the day that he disappeared. British police excavated the area, finding items that may have belonged to Ben, but no conclusive evidence. Imagine the grief of his family after decades of hoping, only to hear such a possibility. To this day, the mystery surrounding Ben's disappearance remains. His mother continues to seek answers, never giving up on finding the truth. Ben's case highlights the anguish of missing children's families and the hope that refuses to die, even when the world moves on. Natascha Kampusch, Vienna, Austria, 1998. 10-year-old Natascha Kampusch was walking to school, just like any other day. Then, out of nowhere, she was snatched and thrown into a white van. The man who took her was Wolfgang Pricklopil, an unassuming-looking individual who would become her captor for the next 3,096 days. That's right, over 8 years of captivity spent in a small, windowless basement cell. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? How someone could vanish straight from a street and remain hidden for so long. Pricklopil controlled every aspect of Natascha's life. He starved her, abused her, and brainwashed her into submission. Yet, despite the horror, Natascha never lost her will to survive. Over the years, Pricklopil would allow her more freedoms within the confines of his house, taking calculated risks that ultimately led to his downfall. In August 2006, during one of these moments, Natascha saw her chance and escaped. She ran until she found someone who called the police. Finally, she was free. The aftermath was far from simple. The world was fascinated and horrified by her story, but also quick to judge. Some even doubted her experience or speculated she had developed Stockholm Syndrome. Imagine surviving one of the worst situations imaginable, only to have people questioning your trauma. The scrutiny was relentless, but Natascha stood firm, telling her own story through interviews and a memoir. Today, Natascha is a public figure who speaks about the psychological scars of captivity and the dangers of sensationalizing trauma. Her story is a testament to human resilience, but also a disturbing reminder of how easily one can disappear and the immense courage it takes to reclaim your life. Jacob Wetterling, October 22, 1989, was a typical day in St. Joseph, Minnesota for 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling. He was out biking with his brother and a friend when a man with a gun appeared out of nowhere. It's hard to imagine the terror the boys must have felt as the man ordered them off their bikes. He made Jacob's brother and friend run away, warning them not to look back, or else. By the time they did, Jacob was gone. It was as if he vanished into thin air. For decades, Jacob's case was a painful mystery. His parents, Jerry and Patty Wetterling, became tireless advocates for missing children. Their fight led to the creation of the Jacob Wetterling Act, which established a national registry for sex offenders. Jacob's disappearance changed the way law enforcement handled such cases, but for his family, none of it was enough until they had answers about what happened to their son. In a devastating turn of events in 2016, the truth finally came to light. A man named Danny Heinrich, long suspected but never charged, confessed to abducting and killing Jacob, thanks also to DNA technology. He led authorities to Jacob's remains, bringing closure. But at a cost no one wanted to pay. The details Heinrich revealed were heartbreaking, detailing how he had taken Jacob's life on that very night in 1989. Jacob's story is a tragic reminder of the vulnerability of children and the unthinkable things that can happen. But it also highlights the power of advocacy and love. The Wetterlings turned their unimaginable loss into action, helping protect countless other children. It's a legacy Jacob surely would have been proud of. Amber Hagerman. On January 13, 1996, 9-year-old Amber Hagerman was riding her bike near her grandparents' home in Arlington, Texas. It was a bright afternoon, and Amber, full of energy, was doing what kids do best, having fun. But in an instant, everything changed. A man in a black pickup truck grabbed her and sped away. A nearby witness saw it happen and called the police immediately. Tragically, despite the efforts of law enforcement and the community, Amber's body was found 4 days later in a nearby creek. She had been murdered. Amber's story is every parent's worst nightmare. The brutality of her abduction and death shook the nation. But what came next changed the way missing children cases are handled forever. Inspired by the case, the Amber Alert system was created. The idea originated from discussions between Dallas-Fort Worth broadcasters and law enforcement after Amber's case, with local radio stations partnering to broadcast urgent information about abducted children. It's a tool that quickly disseminates information about missing children through radio, TV, and highway signs, helping to mobilize entire communities in minutes. Over the years, the Amber Alert system has saved hundreds of children, but Amber's case remains unsolved. Despite numerous leads, no one has ever been charged. The thought of her killer still being out there is both chilling and infuriating. It's a cruel irony that the system designed to protect other children couldn't bring her justice. Amber's legacy lives on though. Every time an alert is issued, it's a reminder of her life and the importance of not giving up when a child goes missing. Her story is one of both tragedy and hope, painful proof that even in the darkest moments, change can emerge.